I think it's safe to say that life for human beings can be considered on two levels at the same time, which are definitely opposing things at the same time. And that is that it is a puzzle to be solved on one hand, and on the other, it is just a reality to be experienced in the moment without any puzzles whatsoever. Just this sort of sublime thing that is what it is without needing any solution whatsoever. But on the other hand, it's definitely solvable, discoverable. And when people started making these discoveries in the past and started finding out what was going on, they were so ecstatic and excited and changed that it divorced them temporarily from everybody else. It put them on an entirely different level than anybody else, because over time people would find things out and they knew conclusively that it was the truth. They had taken a piece of the puzzle and arranged it, rearranged it by themselves. I mean, it's on the back of other people usually, and usually it involves peers in one's life, conversation, among other things, but a lot of the time it happens alone while a person is isolated. And Newton always comes to mind because I believe it was 1665 or 1666. There was a plague in London, and it killed 25% of the population. And Newton was at Cambridge before that, but the plague forced him to go home, and he spent a year by himself. And that is the year that he made most of his greatest discoveries. And his discoveries were so great, so earth-shattering, that he kept some of them to himself for years and years and years and years. He would leak them out in small ways from time to time, but when he went back to Cambridge, he was a person entering a place surrounded by people who were his peers, but who were all behind. Imagine how strange a circumstance that is, knowing that you have a piece of this puzzle assembled and fixed and put together, and nobody else does. Nobody else. And that still happens. It's just that the words, they come together, and there's a perfect way to say it, but if you don't say it or write it down, it will find itself subject to entropy, just like reality itself, because thoughts have a charge, sense has a charge, interpretation has a charge, but it can't be held or sustained. It has to be released to at least another person or diffused out into the public, and it needs to be absorbed by the public and become part of what is considered the common sense. And it needs to build and build and build, because things that are common today obviously were once highly controversial, highly revolutionary, strange concepts. But it's happened over and over and over again. The more one looks at history, the more a person starts to see a pattern, and that is that these people were all trying to figure out what's going on, and they were all seemingly, especially more and more over time, trying to unify religion and science. They were trying to make them commensurate, which seems like the ultimate two halves of a whole. It's like the ultimate and final piece of the puzzle, and there's so many smaller parts within it that are still left undone that still need to be figured out. But over and over and over again. And it's funny too, like how it goes in cycles, because you had people like Jung and Freud who are relatively new, but they were turbocharged by Nietzsche and even Newton and Voltaire. But since Freud and Jung, and maybe a collection of people who were peripheral to them, it doesn't seem like psychology really has a champion these days, you know. It doesn't seem like there's a person who intuitively understands these things, like the human mind, and is actively researching it and putting it into words. Because a lot of what we use today was discovered then by those two guys and the people who orbited them. It seems like, in my own personal experience, as I learn about various people and various points in history, various events, there's a maximum that I have. If I start watching too much basketball, or if I start veering off and getting into something else for a time, it takes up some of the bandwidth that I have. And it's like I need to synthesize what I've learned within the last week and do it quickly. Otherwise, it will just recede and diffuse into entropy, and it'll be tucked away and less available over time. It's like there's a maximum. And as I'm learning about one person, one historical figure, and then I move to the next, I can't help but see the patterns and the influences between the two. And that's the moment. That's when the iron is at its hottest. When you are knee deep in research and whatever it is, history or whatever it is, and conclusions need to be drawn then, and either said or written down or diffused in some way. But even if you write it down, if you try to write down a sentence that is the kind of combined sum of a chain of thought, it is nowhere near what it was when you had it. It's not the same thing. Like when you're in the middle of a sort of stream of consciousness, of thought, and it's been a couple of minutes, you know, and you're having these kind of revelations, I guess, and you can feel it, you know, you can feel the internal geography, you can feel it moving, the motion. That is a experience that is completely different than rereading the sentence later, because it's almost like rereading the sentence later is in a vacuum, in a strange way. It doesn't have the same real-time connections to the information that's being pulled up out of you, you know, in context to what you're seeing and learning in real time. And it's almost like it's a specific mode, you know, to be thinking like that. Because as with all things, one can't spend their entire time thinking deeply, just as one can't spend their entire time in a shallow way. It's like we can only stand being shallow for so long. Like if we're shallow for an extended period, there's going to be a need for real depth, you know, something. But if a person spends too much time in the depths, deep, then shallowness is a reprieve. And it's going to be a theme forever for myself to be talking about opposing things that appear as mutually exclusive, that appear as things that are in conflict, but they're actually part of a whole and a cycle. And it's a matter of scaling too, because it's not just me, it's not just reality, but it's civilizations, it's entire groups of people that have on-off cycles. And it is completely a matter of your level of magnification. You can pick out a person in a city and really discover them and talk to them and get a feel for the city. You know, it's almost like a single person is always going to be a representative for their whole, you know, for their system. And people like Socrates used to go around. He never wrote anything down. There's the only proof we have of him is from Plato, who was almost like a disciple, you know, who followed him around and wrote. But Socrates, he just went around barefoot and looking almost like a poor man, questioning people who were supposed to know. He specifically targeted people who were supposed to be experts in whatever it is their discipline was. Like he would target generals and ask them what courage is. And he found over and over and over again that people had no idea what they actually meant when they said something like courage. They knew the physical animations of it, the physical showings of it, but they did not have the words to accurately describe what it actually is over and over and over again. That's why one of his most famous statements is that he knows nothing, because he has found over and over and over again that once you really pin it down and isolate a word or a concept, it's very difficult to actually describe what it is. Because as you describe what something is within its context, then it excludes some other thing that's also fitting within that word, within that definition, you know. And it goes and goes and goes. And that's why he ended up getting killed, ultimately, because he made everybody look stupid. And as time goes on, in my opinion, it's getting easier to unify the spiritual, whatever you might want to call that, and the scientific, the actual raw experience. Like right now, a huge, just overwhelming source of the truth, quote unquote, is what is going on right now. It's like if you can smooth out your thoughts and not have one particular thought in mind and just sort of let your attention recede into your nerves and through your body and let it kind of connect with what's happening around you, it seems like revelations have a way of just showing up, you know, out of context, and it sort of gives you a context. It gives you like a tunnel to go down, and it starts making sense, and it always seems to ring true. It never seems to give you things that are genuinely false, you know. But on top of that, everything a person learns, including myself, everything that I know is tucked away in my unconscious. And I can't help but view that as rings around my very sharpened center of awareness, my conscious, my actual attention and awareness itself. Attention feels like a small spinning ball, constantly changing, maybe getting a little larger and a little smaller from time to time, but the conscious awareness seems like a small spinning ball, and the unconscious seems like I said, large rings surrounding consciousness that constantly feeds into and takes away from the ball, from the center of awareness, almost like Saturn's rings, you know. And the consciousness itself, the center of awareness, seems like it's mostly concerned with real time. It's mostly concerned with moment to moment construction of what's happening and troubleshooting. It's the thing that makes it true, the situation where no matter how many times we're presented with a situation, it's still brand new, strangely. And you can only see that kind of thing, like genuinely feel it, if you aren't thinking about anything at all. Things that are true about oneself start to genuinely take shape, like they seem to be in the form of actual shapes. Like awareness seems like a ball, a spinning ball, And it's strange how the science of the day and of history pans out and sort of confirms what people have been saying this entire time, sort of intuitively. Like how reality is an electronic representation. And the brain is more mysterious than reality itself. How can this little 3-pound mass be so powerful? Our brains, there's a part of our brain specifically there for making sure we feel separate, making sure that we feel some sense of isolation, so that we may be an individual. Without that part of the brain, our actual conscious attention, our consciousness, the spinning ball, can be located somewhere else, which sounds very, very strange. But you can practice wherever you are right now. Take your awareness and set it 1 foot behind you. Like really let the image of the back of your head and everything build. And you can feel how the point of view from behind your eyes starts to lessen. You can kind of forget what you're actually seeing right in front of you and watch your attention be consumed by the image of the back of your head. And you can say that's your imagination, which is true, but the imagination has to be some element of the truth, and that's what it's built off of. The fragment grows and grows and grows and fills and expands. And there have been the strangest circumstances on accident, people during surgery, like brain surgery, where this was discovered completely by accident. There have been people who have been clinically dead, completely out, brain not operating, heart not pumping, body's cold, but they have a clear image of the surgery from on high, from above. They remember the conversation that was going on, the music that was playing, the instruments that were used, none of which was available while the person was awake or alive. And it happens with remarkable consistency, especially the part of the brain that separates us. That part can be stimulated and a person can appear somewhere else in the room, in the corner or somewhere nearby, doesn't matter. And the person can still speak from that point of view, because over time, people have said that consciousness is a field. Things that are arranged, things that exist in some form, are conscious, more or less. Human beings just happen to be, so far as we know, the apex, the most dense crystallization, the most individuated, so much so we are characters, we are animated. But we feel so much for creatures of Earth, the animals of Earth, because we are near peer. And we can bring animals closer to ourselves. And of the things that we do know, one of the things is that over time, doing something, anything, makes you better at it. You seem to accrue linear experience. It seems to compound over and over and over and over again, which is kind of a clue as to our nervous systems and what's happening. We wake up the next morning, we remember yesterday, we remember that there is some investment made in shooting arrows, and we know that if we do it again today, we'll be a little bit better, but we're also a little bit afraid that yesterday's experience won't necessarily show itself today. That's kind of the thin line. It's like this excitement about the accrual of experience, but the fear that maybe you aren't learning so quickly, or maybe it won't show. But there is a satisfaction when it does show, obviously. There's a strange satisfaction when something that you've been practicing at goes as it's supposed to, even better than it's supposed to be honest, sometimes, And we spend our entire lives doing that. And we've come up with things that we didn't even know we could do. There are still things that we have no idea that we're capable of, that we'll find out about. This is an ongoing project that has an indeterminate end. We don't know the end of this story. We are very, very good at theorizing, and as infinite as reality is, in and of itself, is equal to our own theorizing in various futures and potentials, It's satisfying to theorize about a future and have it happen, because that is also a skill. It's a skill in noticing. It's a skill in being aware of the built-up energy and potential of a thing or a collection of things or a person, and knowing its character, knowing where it's going to go next. But even within that knowing, there's a massive amount of uncertainty too. There has to be. There always has to be a certain amount of knowing and known, and uncertainty and unknown. You'll never truly get one of those two things to defeat the other. No matter what we do, no matter how excellent we become, no matter what we figure out, the unknown is always going to be right at the edge, always. And that's true right now, and it always will be. In the same way, I don't know what exactly I'm going to say 10 seconds from now. But I do know I'll be talking. And that's the thing. You don't have to know the details. All you have to know is the overall facilitating elements. It's like I always reference sports because there's such a good microcosm for reality. I mean, when teams play each other, they can become rivals if the games are of a certain character. We play the same teams, the same people over and over and over again. And we have a recollection of the sort of character that each player was during the games, We have these mini relationships within the actual relationships of the teams. And surrounding that, you have to do this in front of thousands of people who influence the game as well. It's such a complicated exchange of energy, and it's beautiful, If a person can look at that situation as well in two basic ways. There's the person who is deeply plugged into the game, who is deeply in the dramatics of it. Then there's the person who is more distant, sort of just in awe at the fact that this exists how it does, at a more detached level. But on both levels, there's a distinct beauty. And I think the same person can go back and forth between those two things. and even a basketball player. Any team that's ever lost a game would have won if only they made every shot. Why didn't they make every shot? I mean, imagine saying that to a player, that's really the best advice. Just make every shot. Simple. It's really the ultimate highest level of what you could say to somebody. It doesn't really require any deep thought or strategy. It's the truth. If you make every shot, you'll win. But that situation in and of itself gives you a little glimpse into the very fabric of reality itself, because you're not going to make every shot. There has to be some unknown too, because theoretically, if every basketball player was guaranteed to make every shot, what would basketball players be doing then? It would completely change the rules of the game. If hypothetically every shot was guaranteed to go in, the whole point of basketball would be different. You'd be able to throw the ball from anywhere and it would go in. Of course, the further you are away, the more difficult it is. The closer you get, the easier it is. It's the driving force of the entire structure of the game, trying to throw this ball into this hoop that's slightly larger than the ball. And people come up with these very, very complicated ways of getting there. These very, very complicated ways of getting the ball in the hoop. But for whatever reason, it's utterly hypnotizing to watch, because these guys, their entire neurology is devoted to being able to get these defenders to fall on the ground, or to fake them out, or to get by them because they're faster. Like, the entire thing is a certain sort of miniature story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we need that. We absolutely need that. It's a requirement for human existence to have that situation be playing out, whether it's a basketball game or somewhere in our lives. Like, it's a requirement that we have these two teams who have records too, who have previous seasons, who have whole stories and profiles for each player and the coach and even the front office. We need those knowns, those quantifiables, to go up against each other and create this friction zone that becomes the unknown, where the best in the world play against each other. If a game is a complete blowout and the end becomes known too soon, people get bored. If you're up by 50 with, 5 minutes left in the third quarter, the announcers start talking about something else. They barely even talk about the game. Maybe they'll talk about the game from time to time, but they kind of veer off, because it's the natural tendency as the outcome becomes truly and definitely fixed and known. That spinning ball of attention becomes less gripped. But if a team is down by 50 in the third quarter and they come back and win, that is really the ultimate right there. To be sure that you've lost, but by sheer force of will and ability, you come back from 50 and win. That's the stuff of legends. That's how legends become legends. By winning against overwhelming certain odds against them. Can't be done. And the best games are the ones that have the lead go back and forth, all the way to the end. And the time constraint is the deciding factor. Who's up when the buzzer ends? And within that simple framework, you got 10 guys on the court, 5 guys on each team, a ball, and 2 hoops. Throw it in there. And within that simple bit of rules, those fixed knowns, those certainties, you can have an entire litany of infinite unknowns go on over and over and over and over and over again. You'll never get two identical games. The lawn in the morning is not as it was the day before. It's the same lawn, yes. The framework and the basics are still there, but truly the lawn is not the same as it was the day before. And it just depends on your level of magnification. And really, I think the goal of civilization that this whole time, if you look at it really, it has been to set up a situation where a person can do this over and over and over again, improve in some way with something, hone their neurology in some way over time to become a master of something, anything, in a way that allows you to get something from the world that you know that you earned, that you deserve. You deserve it. But you deserve it because you're good. You're not just lucky. You're good. You did it. You showed that you can hone your neurology, that you can comprehend something so intimately and become so good at it that you are an expert. Now you teach people. People want to hear from you about, whatever it is. People come to you. And believe me, it's awesome when people are experts on that level, but they're still dealing with the unknown at the highest level because we're always scraping against this barrier, this sort of ever-changing unknown. And when you're an expert at something, you put yourself in a position where whatever that thing is, whenever you're doing it, you can trust yourself there. You can rest in your nervous system and your entire biology. And in that situation, you are fully trusting what's happening because you're just so good at it. And in that situation, you deal with the unknown in a way that is highly satisfactory. And in general, a human being can become a master of being a human being, of understanding reality itself, and always kind of have that trust. But even if you have that, it's still going to be subject to entropy, it's still going to erode, and it's still going to give way to situations where you need to master even more to regain the trust that you slowly lose. It happens over and over in cycles, enlightened people, in the spiritual sense, see the truth, and then it dissolves and they slowly plug back into the human situation and the human reality, their individual reality, and they have that enlightened experience tucked away within them, but they have to regain it. That they end up far out somewhere, or you could say deeply within, both apply, but that state erodes and they slowly become an individual again. And once they hit peak individual once again, and they're all the way back within themselves, a person is going to want to find that state of objectivity, or as close to it as possible once again. And it'll go and go and go, and in between these states of objective detachment, there is extreme attachment. And that attachment changes the states of objectivity. It's like a punctuation in between. And vice versa. The objective states, the states of objectivity, these truly detached states punctuate the attached states. It changes the way you attach to things, which is strange to say, but it's true. These punctuations go on and on and on, and a person learns what they need to learn from those states, and a person's brain changes across their life, and their entire physiology changes, obviously. And all of these things improve a person's ability to plug into the current, the awe that is what is currently happening, what is currently available to the senses, to human comprehension, as well as their ability to detect pieces of the puzzle and solve them and contribute to them. Because it's also deeply satisfying to add another piece to the puzzle of what the fuck is going on. To me, that's one of the most interesting things about life, is that it is indeed a problem to be solved, as well as a reality to be experienced. And, it's hard to say exactly where we are on that, but we are surely finding out.